Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to a chapter-by-chapter read-through of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. We are reading through The Fellowship of the Ring. We're getting close to the end. We're very close to the end of the book. And we have reached the point where our heroes, minus the wizard Gandalf, who has fallen apparently to his destruction, arrive in the elvish stronghold of Lothlorien, which is ruled over by Celebrant and Galadriel. Mainly Galadriel. He's a bit of a henpecked husband, and we don't get the impression that they like each other much. And there's nothing that Tolkien has written anywhere in the whole of The Lord of the Rings or the appendices that will change that impression. After all, when Galadriel at the end of the book sails over the west back to Valinor, Celebrant doesn't go with her. It's not exactly an iron bond of love and affection. But here our characters have come to Lothlorien, and they find it hard to tell how long they've been there. Time sort of comes to a halt in Lothlorien. But it's mainly a time of healing. They've got there raw with grief from losing Gandalf. And the elves know that and invite them constantly to eat, to sing, sleep in pavilions on the open grass, or however you like, to heal yourself. Lothlorien is in winter now, and as Galadriel says in this chapter, it will never see a spring and summer. Not the way it was. The end is coming, one way or another. But it's time for them to go. This is the chapter where they leave Lorien, where our fellowship is to continue on their way. They're told they go for an audience with Celebrant and Galadriel. They're told that they have to go and that boats will be made ready for them and that they'll have an official leave taken. And then they leave that audience and go off to talk on their own. All of them together, including Legolas, who's not spent much time with his friends while he's been in Lorien. And in one of the few narrative nitpicks that I have with Tolkien, this is a master writer, but one of the few choices he makes in this book with which I violently disagree is that we don't hear that conference. We're told that they all go off together and we get a bit of it, just a bit of it. And the bit is so well done that where Frodo sees very clearly that despite his time healing in Lothlorien, Boromir is still not completely to be trusted. Yes, he has been told at the Council of Elrond, you cannot use the ring. Yes, it seems like a mighty weapon that can be turned against the enemy, but it can't be. It's thoroughly evil. It will make you evil. And we think, briefly anyway, a little in the Council of Elrond that Boromir is well rebuked and that he understands. In the bit that we get of the conversation that the Fellowship has here, we see clearly, Frodo sees clearly, that he does not accept that. That he has to stop himself from bemoaning the idea of throwing away all our chances. He amends himself to say something other than the ring, which he does not. He considers Frodo's mission to be foolhardy. Aragorn says that Gandalf's plan originally was to go to Lorien and that he didn't have a plan after that. I think it's pretty clear that Gandalf's plan was to go to Gondor, Boromir's hometown, Boromir's great kingdom. But we don't hear any of that. We get that little scene where Frodo knows that Boromir is not completely to be trusted, but that's it. We get almost nothing else. I would like to have heard that whole conversation. What everybody thinks, what they want to do, where they want to go, whether or not they want to continue on to Gondor with Boromir and Aragorn. It's a nitpick, I know, of course. The book is great. I'm loving it more with every time I reread it, but still, this chapter wastes a lot of time, including almost a full page of verse in Elvish, so you don't even know what it is. It's just a language that Tolkien made up. So there's room to spare here to give us that. I don't think a lack of room was the reason Tolkien didn't include it. I just think he didn't want to do it, but it bugs me. It just bugs me. But our heroes are told, get a good night's sleep. You're leaving tomorrow, so they do, and then they do. They're given some Elvish boats, and the elves also give them some gifts. Galadriel gives each member of the Fellowship a gift of her own, of some kind or other, whether it's a halberd or a belt for a sword or sheath for Anduril, or the file of Galadriel, which she gives, the light of Arendelle, the light of a star, which is going to save Frodo and Sam's life later on. But she gives them that against whatever. She gives 3 tresses of her hair to Gimli the dwarf, who asks it against his will. She forces him to say what it is that you really want. And there's a wonderful moment between them where Gimli is clearly besotted with Galadriel. And it's a wonderful moment because the elves have long history with the dwarfs of distrust and dismissal, scorn. And the company, just in general, is given elvish cloaks that sort of shimmer and blend into the background. They're light, but they're also warm. The company is also given elvish whey bread that they're just like toasted crackers, but as long as they're intact and they're well preserved, one of those is so stimulating that it's worth a whole day's food to march. I don't understand this. I don't understand a lot of this. I'm sorry, I don't mean to gripe about this chapter, but it seems to me that the elves of Lorien could have given our heroes a lot more than they do. A lot more. They give cloaks, sure, that's fine. But what about armor? They don't give much in the way of armor. Maybe they think the Fellowship doesn't need it. They give whey bread, elvish whey bread, but they don't give a gigantic bulging sack of it. They give a tiny amount to each person. Why? And we're told that Galadriel and her handmaidens themselves bake this stuff. It doesn't have to be. They could have got a lot more of it. It's mighty handy. Why would you give them only the provisions for, what, a month? A week? 2 weeks? When you could give them a lot more than that. And also, again, I don't want to stress this point too much. I've already complained that the decision to set for the Fellowship to be 9 members is a writerly decision. It's not a decision that a character inside the story would come to. The Fellowship would certainly have been bigger. Or if it was stuck to 9, it would be 9 heavyweights. It wouldn't be 4 hobbits and then everybody else. I've already railed against that decision. I don't agree with it. It only makes sense because Tolkien liked the idea. But Tolkien's not a character in this story. And he should be writing the decisions that make sense for characters in this story. So I know that number 9 is inviolate, but the Fellowship does not number 9 when they go to Lorien. They're missing a member. And even if the number 9 is sacrosanct, you could still have a guide, or several guides, that wouldn't be members of the Fellowship. You could add a member to the Fellowship here. You would certainly do that. Celebrant could go with them. But even if you didn't add a member to the Fellowship, even if you left Gandalf's spot open to be determined, you could still send guides that aren't members of the Fellowship, but that might be a great deal of help. And they could go for a long way. They say that you're going to send your guides all the way to Falls of Rhoros. Maybe you're going to send them that far. They know the land. Our Fellowship mostly does not. So why not do that? Why are the gifts of the lady so slim, so grudging, it seems to me? I don't know. But our heroes practice maneuvering the boats. They get all their stuff together. They apportion who's going to sit where and when, and they have a final meal with Galadriel and Celebrant and all the elves. And then they row away. That's the whole chapter. They're leaving Lothlorien. Headed for disaster. This Fellowship is doomed. The minute they leave Rivendell, they hit misfortune. The minute they make an alternate plan, they hit tragedy. The minute they leave Lothlorien, they're going to hit tragedy, and there's no way around that. They do not have an easy row of it. But that's all there is in this chapter. There's plenty of room in this chapter. It could have been, 10 pages longer to include a discussion of the Fellowship. How grating is that to know that our Fellowship, even minus Gandalf, these characters are not all together very much longer. How frustrating is it to know that they had a long, detailed, pointed conversation and we didn't get it? Anyway, I'm not all that happy with this particular chapter. It's, I think, a placeholder, and we move on. The next chapter is not a placeholder, so we'll wrap this up here, and we'll move on next time as we approach the end of the Fellowship of the Ring. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.